The most shocking part of Ozzy Osbourne's final goodbye, it wasn't the farewell itself, it was the feeling beneath it all. As Birmingham watched one of its most famous sons step toward the end of a career that literally forged heavy metal, the image was almost impossible to process. The Prince of Darkness didn't look immortal anymore, he looked human. And honestly, that might be the single most powerful thing Ozzy ever showed us. For decades, Ozzy seemed entirely immune to consequence. Scandal, excess, injury, reinvention, pure survival. He outlasted eras, headlines, and everyone's expectations. But this goodbye? This was different. It wasn't built on shock value or a crazy stunt. It was built on raw truth. Listen to me, stay with me here. Because once you look past the myth, you start to see something far more moving. A final act that says just as much about human endurance as it does about the music. Before the massive legend, there was just John Michael Osbourne, a working-class kid from Birmingham with a dream. Then came Black Sabbath. Alongside Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward, Ozzy helped create a darker, heavier sound that changed rock forever. We're talking about songs like Paranoid, Iron Man, and War Pigs. These didn't just become hits, they became the literal blueprints for a genre. Then came the total collapse, his brutal exit from Sabbath in 1979. By all logic, that should have been the end. Instead, Ozzy roared back with Blizzard of Oz and Crazy Train. He proved he wasn't just the voice of a band. He was a terrifying force on his own. Years later, the Osbournes showed us an entirely different side of him. Confused, hilarious, chaotic, but oddly tender. That wild contrast made him completely unforgettable. Life looked mythic from the outside. But in the background, the physical damage was quietly accumulating. The simple version of the story is easy to swallow. An aging rock icon finally says goodbye, but that is strictly surface level. Look closer. Ozzy's final chapter was shaped by an agonizing physical struggle. He suffered major, life-altering injuries from a 2003 ATV accident. Then, a brutal fall in 2019 worsened old spinal damage, leading to multiple horrifying surgeries. He later stood up and spoke publicly about his Parkinson's diagnosis. By 2023, he admitted he was no longer physically capable of regular touring. That changes everything. This wasn't just a plush retirement. It was a brutal public reckoning between a legendary stage persona and a body that simply could no longer obey the myth. And here is the part that will absolutely stay with you. Even after all of that agony, the goodbye still mattered enough for Ozzy to drag himself home. Back to Birmingham, back to exactly where the noise began. Listen closely, because this is the bleeding heart of it all. That final performance was not about pretending he was still untouchable. It was about standing naked in front of the truth and singing anyway. The evidence of that painful truth was never hidden from us. It was right there, in his own words. In the heartbreaking canceled tours, in the endless surgeries, in the visible pain etched on his face, and in the way his farewell carried so much more weight than mere spectacle. Every single chapter supports the exact same conclusion. Black Sabbath gave heavy metal its dark shadow. Ozzy's solo career gave it a wild personality. But his later years, they gave it severe vulnerability. And that might just be his most profoundly overlooked contribution. If you're seeing that too, let me know in the comments right now. Was Ozzy's final goodbye deeply sad? Or was it one of the absolute bravest exits rock history has ever seen? But there are still burning questions that linger in the dark. Can heavy metal ever fully separate itself from the broken people who built it? What really happens when a man famous for defying every human limit finally meets one he absolutely cannot break? And was Ozzy's greatest performance the chaos of his prime, or the brutal honesty of his farewell? This is the most important part of the entire story. Because sometimes the final mystery isn't how a legend rose, it's how he chooses to walk away. Ozzy Osbourne's legacy is so much bigger than the controversy, the costumes, or the cheap tabloid mythology. He helped birth a genre. He gave deep alienation a definitive sound. He made millions of outcasts and outsiders finally feel seen. And in the very end, he showed us something quieter but just as lasting. Pure survival has its own incredible kind of power. They could call him wild, reckless, even totally impossible, but they could never ever say he was ordinary. So when we sit down to talk about Ozzy Osbourne's final goodbye, the real shock isn't that it finally happened, it's what it revealed about the man. Behind the darkness was iron discipline. Behind the towering legend was excruciating pain. And behind the farewell was a man returning to the very beginning, not to desperately relive the myth, but to close it with absolute dignity. If you want more stories that look past the flashy headline and dig into the raw truth beneath it, hit subscribe right now. And if this goodbye moved you, you need to watch the next investigation on screen. Because this story doesn't end with Ozzy. It opens up a massive question about what happens when our music legends become mortal right in front of our eyes.